In section 6.1, we're going to look at the prevalence of heat stress during exercise. So this is a really great starting point to preface that heat stress and hyperthermia is actually very common in exercise and sports, and not exclusively in sports that are extreme endurance or sports that are in extreme environments. Think long sessions in the heat of summer. Now, there was a really great systematic review by Henderson and team that looked at 34 different studies of intermittent sports, so any type of sport or activity with intermittent breaks, and looking at the rates and frequencies of hyperthermia identified. Now, for definition's sake, modest hyperthermia is defined as a core temperature between 38.5 Celsius and 39.5 Celsius. Meanwhile, marked hyperthermia, which is the more extreme hyperthermia, is when core temperature exceeds 39.5 degrees Celsius. Now, it is important to note that performance degradation will happen before the onset of hyperthermia. So you're going to start identifying the curves and trends as that core temperature elevates. So we've got a few figures from this study. And this first one is a great visual representation showing that in the yellowish orange is modest hyperthermia, and then in the darker maroon, that is your marked, that's your above 39.5 degrees Celsius core temperature. You're going to see of the studies that were done of different sizes, the majority of them do show some degree of hyperthermia. Now, what's really interesting is that even studies with short competition duration, so we're looking at less than 25 minutes of activity, as well as activities with a wet bulb globe temperature that's relatively low. I mean, between 15 and 20, and even some below 15 degrees Celsius wet bulb, still show signs of hyperthermia. So it is very, very possible, even in short activity, in activities with intermittent rest periods, and in activities in relatively cool conditions, to still experience hyperthermia. So this is part one of a two-part figure that was provided in the study by Henderson, which I'd highly recommend. And this outlines all the different studies that were looked at, the different sports, and exactly where on the hyperthermia scale, or the core temperature, peak core body temperature scale, they landed. So different sports, they vary. Some of the studies looked at different positions and different contexts. So the best way would really be to look at this study more comprehensively. But this visual just really helps to show that in a lot of different studies, looking at different sports, different sizes, different durations, different environments, hyperthermia is very, very common. About 88% of studies found some degree of hyperthermia. So that leads to the question, why are intermittent sports so vulnerable, or intermittent activity or intermittent exercise? Well, as we've looked at in this course, metabolic heat production is the primary contributor to heat stress. Not environmental heat stress, but metabolic heat production. The two most significant factors for the metabolic heat production are volume and intensity. Now, intermittent sports often involve high bursts of intensity. There's often short rest intervals in between these rates of activity. And again, this is specific sports to sport. A lot of these activities contain protective clothing or gear, so there's limitations on evaporative cooling. And if you have these extended durations, some matches, some games can last 2-3+ hours, and many of them also in hot environmental conditions. All of these variables combine to make hyperthermia very common in intermittent sports and activity.